Drop it.
Welcome to Be Real, the Maryland Real Estate Podcast. I'm Brad Cox with the Vesta Group of Long & Foster, joined by my holy cow, almost lifelong friend, Michael Becker.
I'd say the great majority of life, our lives.
The vast majority.
43 out of 58 years. What's that
Yeah.
percentage? It's got to be close, pushing 80% of our lives.
Sweet Georgia Brown. Yeah, 43
Michael
years.
Becker.
43 years. Yeah, Michael Becker.
Good to be with you, Brad.
Good to
Michael
see you,
Becker of
Michael.
Sierra Pacific Mortgage.
And we have another guest this week, Michael.
Yes,
Very
sir.
excited. Yes, we have Tim Schatzberger. Tim, with Homeland Environmental. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for
really
sitting
appreciate
in,
you being
Tim.
here, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And today we're talking about Well and Septic and Tim's company. They're our go-to, well, for anything environmental, but for Well and Septic, we're talking about Well and Septic. Tim's company they're just the best. And so we use them all the time. Which, thank you, Tim, for running such a great company.
I expect to be educated today. It's something that everyone should know about, but very few people have much knowledge on.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? There's something's novel, something you haven't lived on Well and Septic before. You may be intimidated by it. So we just kind of want to set the record straight, give you some information, maybe help people feel a little bit more comfortable about that. So,
About buying a house with
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I'm excited. I think we're going to try to jump into the conversation about real estate a little quicker today, try to move things along. So, Michael?
Yes.
Let's get into the rundown.
The rundown. Let's talk a little bit about mortgage activity and my prediction for mortgage rates going forward.
Great.
Last week, well, the latest, we always use the Mortgage Bankers Association, and their data is dated 6/30. That's the most recent report, and that saw a decline in mortgage applications of 4.4%.
Yeah.
We had seen applications increase in weeks prior, and that's when we were in a nice range.
Yeah.
Range bound for about the month prior to last week. And maybe the few days the prior week, the last few days of July and last 2 days of June and the first week of July, we saw bonds sell off and mortgage rates go up. And I think that 6/30 data may have reflected the beginning of that. I wouldn't be surprised to see this week's report seeing a drop in applications. But when we're in that mid-6 to high-6 range for 30-year fixed mortgage rates,
right,
people seem to be accepting that level. It's been around for a while. It's a little higher than maybe it was a month ago.
I think you're right. Yeah.
They're adjusting
it's
higher
just when it
rates.
goes above 7 that it gets to be a little painful.
In 2018, 2019, when they hit 5%, that's when people put on the brakes. Now
Right.
it seems to be 7%. It's adjusted up because rates have been higher at
Right.
7%.
Right.
Last week, the sell-off started the previous week because of jobless claims and GDP being jobless claims being lower than expected, GDP coming in stronger than expected.
Right.
It surprised me that 1 week jobless claim number goes up and down. You really want to look at a 4-week average. And the GDP number was 3 months old because that's the first quarter.
Yeah.
It surprised me that markets moved so much. Heading into this past week, I think a lot of bond traders were off. So those who were manning the desk were told not to do anything stupid or buy anything crazy.
Right.
We saw an ADP report that said private payrolls shot up almost 500,000 jobs. That spooked the bond market. We saw a big sell-off.
Yeah.
But the one that's more important is non-farm payroll from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that only showed 209,000 jobs. Interestingly, I think it's something like 15 or 14 out of the last 17 months, there's been a huge difference. And normally, the ADP number has been below the non-farms payroll from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS. This time, it reversed.
Yeah.
Those things do tend to revert to each other, so maybe we'll see that the data from ADP shows higher numbers than the BLS. The reason a strong labor market can make rates go higher is the Fed is really trying to cool the economy. One of the ways they do it is slow down hiring. If there's way too many jobs, more jobs than there are employees or people available for those jobs, it tends to drive wages up.
Yeah.
Wage inflation can feed its way through all other types of inflation and make inflation tough to beat or bring it down to their target level of 2%. My prediction for this coming week was for lower mortgage rates.
Mm-hmm.
I am optimistic that today we saw a nice little rally.
A little bit.
This week, Wednesday of this week, which would be July 12th, we will see the CPI number. Now, I think the headline will come and be the lowest we've seen in a long time because last June's big headline number, 1.2% month over month, goes away.
Yeah.
And the headline number is probably going to be 0.3 or so. So that'll bring it down. But the Fed is really focused on core inflation. That seems to be stuck in the 5 to 4 level. So unless we get a surprise there, we won't see a big rally. But if it comes in line with expectations or just slightly below, I think we'll see mortgage rates drop a little bit.
You think we'll get below 7?
I hope so.
Yeah.
If
Back
that core number comes in a lot hotter than expected, all bets are off, and we'll probably back up above 7 for a bit. Yeah. Right now, as of this recording, the Mortgage News Daily, that's something that changes on a daily basis. We don't like using Mortgage Bankers Association or Freddie Mac's survey because that's a weekly survey that's old data by the time it comes out.
Right.
Mortgage News Daily reports an
Every
average
day.
rate for best borrowers all the time. It's close to a 0-point rate.
Yep.
Right. People forget that Freddie Mac's rate always carries 0.6 or 0.7 points with it. Anyway, Mortgage News Daily as of today was saying 7.12. And I priced out a loan right before we came, and it's right around that level for a prime borrower. So we are a little above 7.
Well, I'd like to see it come down. There was a big, your guy, Logan Modishami.
It's not easy to say his name.
Right. Well, and I was choking at the
My
time,
hair looks
too.
like
You
his
do.
now.
Actually, you're right. I was watching this podcast, a video podcast of him and another woman from Housing Wire this morning. I got hair envy from Logan, I got to say. But and you could be his twin today. But they were talking about, will they go over 8?
Well, the strong jobs market move. How he's an analyst for
Housing Wire.
He used to be on Bankrate.com as one of the industry experts with me. That's how I got to know him, and then now he works. He used to be an originator just like me, and now he's just an analyst for Housing Wire, which is
just an analyst.
Well, I didn't mean it like that. He gets to write about rates without stressing about it.
That's true.
I'm envious of him, if anything, right? I can report it all I want, but I got to remember that the higher rates affect my borrower's ability to buy a house and be able to afford a mortgage payment.
Yeah. Yeah. And the answer to that was, by the way, no, we don't expect them to go. Yeah.
You had somebody in this office said that they were going to 8, and for a while there we were thinking he might be right. Last fall when they got to 7.37.
Right.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, sure hope not. Well, all right. Well, thank you, Michael. Great information. All right, so we'll roll into the real estate side. Looking at the Baltimore metro area as of the week ending July 2nd, data provided by Dr. Lisa Sturdivant, Bright MLS economist. And she always puts out these weekly updates. Great information. Thank you, Lisa. So the weekly new listings in general down in advance of that 4th of July holiday. That's not a surprise in general that, we always see things drop off right around holidays, but the market still pretty competitive, still getting multiple offers for those houses that are nicely updated and in good shape, and buyers are still pretty active despite the rates. New contracts overall in the Bright footprint, that was up 2.9% compared to last week, although it was still down 18.1% from last year. Of course, last year was crazy.
That.
Yeah, right.
But if you were to predict where rates were, a year ago we probably would have thought rates would have been moderating. Inflation's been tougher to beat; they're higher than we thought, and it kind of shows you that buyers tend to accepting that these rates aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Not anytime soon. Yep, absolutely. All right, so the Baltimore Metro specific data. Showings we look at on a pretty regular basis because it's our leading indicator. Year over year down 15.5%, but last compared to a week ago we were also down 21.6%. Again, that's pre-holidays. People are shutting down. They're not thinking about heading out to look at houses. They're getting ready for their holiday celebration, and so that's not surprising. In fact, this is only, that week, it was only the second time this entire year that the showing activity, remember how we've been tracking against 2019 pretty regularly because 2019 was our last quote-unquote normal year.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID,
year,
right?
yeah.
So we track against year over year, but we also look at 2019 data, and there's been only one other instance this year, and then again, this past week, where showing activity dipped slightly below the 2019 level. But that could be a temporary thing. It could be a number of things. Could have been, again, vacations, holiday, interest rates, any number of things. Or it could be people are seeing fewer homes because it's so competitive and so frothy that showing activity is going down because the number of houses overall being shown is less.
They're looking at one or two homes.
They're looking at one or two homes. They got to act.
They don't have time.
They don't have time to look at.
It's sold before they get there.
Yeah.
Days on market is back in the teens.
So that's
nationwide.
Right.
I can't wait to hear what it is here.
Well, so it's a good point. So median time to contract 17 days.
Okay.
Right now that's 10 days up year over year, but last week we're flat. New purchase contracts 19.8% year over year down. Compared to a week ago, only down 0.5%. The new listings, 25.7% down from last year, and last year wasn't any walk in the park either. It wasn't all that great, so really scraping the bottom of the barrel now, and down 2.1% from the previous week. Now the median list price, compared to a year ago, we're up 4%, 374, 475, but actually, compared to a week ago when it was 375, we're down 1.4%. So anyway, so that's the scoop. Oh, that's not the scoop. That's the rundown.
The scoop is next.
But it's the scoop on the market.
Right.
But it's the rundown. Yeah. So now we're going to come back and we're going to talk to Tim, and we're going to ask him a bunch of questions about wells and septic, and hopefully dispel some myths, make people feel a little bit more comfortable about that process. I think some of the finest water available can come from wells, so it's a great thing to listen to. So yeah, there you go. See, and you're relatively unscathed.
He still has his hair.
He does.
I still have my hair.
He does. I grew up in public water and sewer, and I got nothing. So all right. So we'll be back in just a second.
Try it.
And we're back to Be Real, the Maryland Real Estate Podcast. I'm Brad Cox with the Vesta Group of Long and Foster, and sitting across from my old friend.
The amount of years that we've been friends designates us as old.
Yes.
I am not old, my friend.
Neither am I.
I'm a spring chicken.
Yeah.
At least I feel that way many days.
There you go. So, Michael Becker.
How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing great, thanks. And Tim Schatzberger from Homeland Environmental is joining us today. Tim, welcome. Thank you for being here. Really excited to talk to you today about wells and septics, right? Should I go there? It's a deep subject.
I thought I heard them all, Brad. That's a new one.
Such a moron. I'm a dad joke aficionado, but I told you my favorite dad joke, didn't I?
Oh gosh. I'm all ears.
All right, so I carry a bunch of stuff around in my car as a realtor because you never know what you're going to need. And so I have the stepladder in my car. And so I call my son on the way home, and I'm like, hey, Ryan, can you come outside and meet me? Got some stuff I got to carry into the house. And he's like, sure, Dad. So he comes out. He's 22. He's not a kid anymore, but he's like, sure, Dad, I'll come out. So I pull up. He comes out. I grab the stepladder, and I look at him, and I say, this is my stepladder. And he looks at me like, yeah, I can see what it is. And I said to him, I never knew my real ladder. Oh, the look of disgust on his face was just priceless. It was priceless. It was a beautiful thing. So, Tim, welcome, man.
Thank you. I don't have any dad jokes.
That's okay. I have enough for everyone, believe me. But we've reached our limit today, so I'll keep going. But anyway, so if you've never lived on a property that has well and septic before, you could think, hey, this is scary, right? This is new, novel. I've never experienced it. And you might shy away from a property like that if you're a home buyer and you've never experienced that before, right? So we want to spend some time today talking to you to give people kind of a perspective about wells and septics. They don't have to be as scary as people think they might be. They can be a wonderful, excellent source of very clean water. And so we want to have an expert, Tim, come on and give us that information. And in keeping with the theme when we've had other guests come on, who you work with matters. And so that's why, Tim, you're my go-to person. And as you are for many of the real estate agents in the area, and we appreciate that, but need your expertise to just kind of help dispel some of these myths, some concerns that people have, just to help them understand what's really involved with owning a property on well and septic. And what do you need to do if you're buying or selling a property with well and septic? So we'll get into that, if that's cool with you. And I got a bunch of questions that I'd like to ask.
Please.
All right. So, question number one. Key considerations that you've got to think about when you're buying or selling a property that's on a well and septic system. What would you say they are?
Yeah, from the mind frame of the buyer, you want to get some testing done to make sure that things are working. And when you talk about well and septic systems, the well kind of has two tests. You have the well yield test, which tests the quantity of water. In Baltimore County, they have a law from the early 80s that says a seller has to provide you with 1 gallon per minute or more.
Right.
And they also require a bacteria sample in that law. Baltimore County is the only county in Maryland that regulates well testing. But there's those two tests, and under Homeland Environmental, we have Homeland Labs, so we kind of do the analysis within our own lab. It makes it a little bit quicker because the real estate market nowadays is not waiting around.
Right. That's been a huge boon, I got to say. You bringing all that stuff in-house has helped tremendously.
We started the lab because we used to get calls from agents saying, "Where's my water sample?" after day one, and the labs are just too slow, and I was tired of getting the phone calls, so we did that integration, and it's been working out well. And as far from the buyer's perspective, these tests are important, but that's really where the worry should and hopefully ends. You don't have to change your life living on a septic system or a well.
Right.
You just want to make sure that you're not going to have one of those horror stories of this big expense, and I think that's where that intimidation comes from. They're very infrequent, but you hear those horror stories and it's sticking in your head. Good for me. A lot of people get these inspections because of it. But I tell people that you don't need to worry about those weird, rare scenarios until we start telling you that you should start.
Right. Which you'll find out if you have that well and septic inspection. All right. So what about the legal or kind of regulatory requirements with specific to well and septic that buyers and sellers have to be aware of?
I'll start with the well side. In Maryland, they require a water sampling certification. And certification and license are two very different terms. Licensing usually requires some bonds. We have to get licensed through the state of Maryland, increased insurance and so forth. So a water sampler is only a certification, but it is important because we do see even certified water samplers take water samples incorrectly. It's just not as easy as filling up a bottle.
Right.
There's just a lot of science behind it, which I'm not a scientist, but my lab is. So.
But yes, and you play one on TV.
Yes.
No, but you have some. I mean, who's your guy? Who's your main guy?
Kevin Barnaba is our lab director.
Yeah.
Yes. And I couldn't have started a lab if I wanted to because you have to have a science degree, and I do not, and I was not going to go back to school.
Yeah.
On the well yield side, in Baltimore County, you have to be either a master well driller, which takes 7 years of apprenticeship and so forth, or a licensed well pump installer, which is what I am and all of my yield testers are in Baltimore County, or a licensed plumber. So those 3 licenses are all pretty hard to get, and it really diminishes the availability in Baltimore County. Right. And they also require how long a test goes, which, as you know, can go 3 up to 6 hours.
Right, depending on the yield you're getting. Yeah, if it's Baltimore County, if you say want a 3-hour yield test, and then it starts showing up. If it's below a gallon a minute?
4 gallons per minute at the 3-hour mark, then we have to continue the test.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's not cheap, right? 6 hours, we're talking about some expensive licenses. It's,
Right.
it's really good for the realtor to kind of help their buyers understand what they need to budget for when they do look at a well and septic home, because there might be some added inspection costs. In fact, there most certainly will be.
Yeah, and a standard, we've talked about this a little bit before. We had Randy Cottrell on before from Blue Crab Inspections. We talked about the, general inspection costs with him. Regular home inspection, ballpark 500, right? Termite, maybe you're talking about $80. With well and septic, you've got hours and hours and hours and a lot of
It's a
lab
lot.
work and.
Yeah, so we call the county, we're getting records from them, we do a homeowner interview, and I think it really differs from a home inspection where they don't always have that before and after work, because they have some nice software programs where they leave, they're kind of punching that. There's a lot of work on the front and back end, and even the ordering. This is not a cookie cutter business, and we really have to consult with our customers to make sure that they're getting what they want, and that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there are plenty of times. So, like for me, and not all agents think about this, but I'm just kind of twisted in that way. But I will anytime I have a client who's looking at a property that's on a main road, I always make sure you got to add a chloride test, right?
That's a terrific example, and hopefully our CSRs, our staff is looking that in depth where we are looking up your address. We're going to see if you're near a major roadway, which, by the way, saltwater intrusion from road salts gets into wells, and it's a huge problem. It's going to be bigger, and that's a great point. You're a pretty knowledgeable realtor. Most realtors would not know to think about stuff like that.
Well, it's a sickness, but I'm hoping they're going to develop some medication for it eventually. But anyway.
To your point, though, like you're comfortable with well and septic, and
Yeah.
our company works with a lot of agents that are not comfortable with that. And it takes a lot of knowledge and kind of patience to make sure that they understand what all this is, because again, it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah, good. All right, so let's talk about some. I mean, we talked about how it could be scary and intimidating, but there can be some advantages and maybe some disadvantages of having well and septic as opposed to being connected to a municipal water and sewer supply. So, what are the advantages? What are the disadvantages?
One easy way is what's the cost of water in the city right now per month? Right?
Yeah.
You add that up. You're talking over $1,000 a year for water and a well.
Easily.
Even though that you have that large upfront cost of a well to install and construct it, you make your money back pretty quickly when you compare it to Baltimore City. Now we're in the county. It's only $35 every 3 months. That formula changed a little bit.
Although that will change once they put this regional water authority in place.
Water's not going to get cheaper. And if I'm going to bore you guys, PFAS is a new element that the EPA just came out and set a regulation to, which it's been like 20 years since the EPA has done that.
Wow.
That means that they have to take that out of the water, and that means that's going to be more expensive. So this stuff's never going to get cheaper. But in theory, and it's not like I have numbers to prove this, but it's always said that a well and a septic system are cheaper than public sewer and public water.
Yeah.
And it's more environmentally friendly if you're taking care of your system.
Right.
The bad rap that septic systems get is there's just too many people who aren't maintaining them. And yes, they're they're putting nitrates in the bay, and it's a problem. But if they're maintained well, they're much more environmentally friendly than sewer, which dumps millions of gallons into the Chesapeake Bay every year because the sewer system overflows.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there are some septic systems that can be more expensive than others, right? You live near any kind of tidal water, then you might wind up getting into some more pricey systems that are, they're more involved and obviously then more costly. But I think you're right. Over time, well and septic can be much more cost effective. All right, so how about the tests, right? Like, how do you determine if the well and septic are in good condition, functioning properly, right? Are there specific tests that you should perform? What should you do? And if you're a seller, are there things that you can do ahead of time too?
On the well side, I kind of just explain that in terms of the well yield test and water sample. A well yield test should be consistent. In other words, if another company came out a week after we did a well yield test, they should get pretty much the exact same result.
Yeah.
A water sample can change. We have a lender right here. He's not going to want to see a water sample that's 90 days old,
right?
Because it could have nitrates in it now when it did 90 days ago. So there is kind of a timing concern with that. In Baltimore County, a well yield is good for, I believe, 2 years. So you can go to public record and get a well yield that we did 2 years ago. In fact, we get calls often where somebody orders a well yield test. We pull public records and we see that we were there, and we supply them that info, and then they decide whether they want to use that, it's free, or pay for another test, and that's really up to the buyer.
Right.
On the septic side, as we talk about regulations, we were regulated as of January 1st. Maryland Department of Environment requires us to have licenses now, and they have a report which you know about, Brad. It's not a very good report, and unfortunately they didn't consult the industry. And what we're doing as a company is we're using our traditional reports, which we feel are just way more. They're better. They're more understandable.
Much more
more
comprehensive and easier to understand.
But the law requires us to fill out the MDE form as well. So, it would be great if Maryland had one form, because that means everybody can read it and understand it. And unfortunately, I feel that we were the effort wasn't quite put in by MDE. And on the septic side, so they didn't regulate what to do, and that's kind of a problem in Maryland. When I first got into business 19 years ago, there were a lot of home inspectors doing dye tests, where they just kind of throw a dye packet in, go out in the yard an hour later, and see if you see dye popping up by the ground. And it really kind of led to a lot of arguments over the septic industry. Yes, you should pump a septic tank during inspection. We're saying, no, why would you waste your money doing that? You should dig up this and find out. And it really confuses people, because there's a lot of people that don't understand what's quality and what's not quality.
Right. Yeah, okay. So what about red flags? What kinds of things would be really big warning signs that could indicate some potential problems with the well or septic system? Like if you had a home inspection, a well and septic inspection on a property, is there something that would cause you to walk away from that home if something came up?
With well and septic systems, I think they're difficult because they're below ground, and you just don't get this initial, reaction or feeling, other than the house was built 80 years ago and we see no records of a system being replaced. There's some negativity that can go into that just with an older system. But no, we really want to remain open-minded. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's failing. And you really have to dig to see the components of the system, and that takes a lot of effort. Again, I'm going to complain about Maryland. We don't have great access. There's a lot of digging, and that's tough on these inspectors who are very well educated, speak well, write well, and then they have to spend half their day digging holes. It's really tough to find that combination. And again, it doesn't make things cheap, whereas other states can kind of avoid that. So it's really tough for me to say, hey, look for these concerns. But I'll say this: if you go to a yard and there's a big puddle in the backyard and hasn't rained in a week, probably have a problem. But even in this crazy market, we're just not seeing that from sellers. We are seeing a lot of bad systems out there that they were hoping people wouldn't find, but just the when a septic system fails, it's at grade and it smells and it's awful. And again, you have to replace it. It's not one of these things you can kind of hide and get by for a year. Your neighbors will be calling the health department and getting them out there to talk to you.
It's funny. I had a property once for sale. I had the listing, and the buyers had a septic test, and the septic test failed, and it wasn't draining out into the fields correctly, and the county came out, and so that deal fell apart. But 2 days later, we found another buyer who was like, "Well, I'd be willing to have a conversation with you and talk through it and see, what can be done about this issue." So a more enlightened buyer, and so we had they had their person come out, and the county came out. And by the way, the folks in Baltimore County, the Department of Environment there, they're a phenomenal resource.
Other counties don't say that about their environmental health departments, by the way. Baltimore County is one of the better ones. They're well-funded, and they have people that care.
Yeah, I got to say, they're really good, top-notch. When I've called them to ask a question, so if you ever have a question about them, we'll put their information in the show notes.
They're very helpful, which helps me, because sometimes I'm in the middle of an argument. I'm like, why don't you call the county and get their opinion on that?
Yeah, they're really good at that. But anyway, the county came out, they pulled some old diagrams, and they found that there was a distribution box in the system that was linked to another drain field, completely unused and untapped, that they had just channeled to the one side. And it failed on the one side, but the other side was free and clear. And so the original buyer, who was envisioning this, I have a $20,000 septic repair that I have to look at now, wound up being a $1,700 fix that the seller covered and the work was done in a day, and it was simple. So the point is, even if you have an issue, it's not necessarily always the biggest issue, and there can be a good way to get around the issue and come up with a solution. And yeah, we're really lucky here in the county, in Baltimore County, to have.
I don't want to go off your topics of questions here, but that's a difference in what we call a septic evaluation and a camera septic inspection.
Yeah.
The camera inspection is more expensive, obviously, but an inspection in MDE's terms is we have to look at all the components. How can you inspect a system if you're not looking at all the components? A camera is the only way to allow us to do that. We can look in the pipe, but it's also a locator. So we can find where that distribution box is, which is 3 feet below grade. There's just no way to find it without a camera.
Right.
And our camera inspections, as long as there's access, close enough to grade, we dig it up and we'll find that there is another portion. But if we did our evaluation, which is cheaper, hey, there's a problem, but we really can't guide you too much now. We need somebody else to come in and dig it up before they can give you those answers.
I always order the camera on the septic inspection. Yeah, I think it's important. You get so much more information. So thanks, Tim, for mentioning that. All right, so we've talked about some of the things to watch out for. Then there's just kind of owning that system over time. So what are the typical maintenance requirements for maintaining both the well and the septic?
On the well side, if you have clean water and plenty of water, you really don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
Now, you might have water conditioning because you might have high hardness or low acidity, and you want to correct for that. Now you have some water conditioning. You do want to hire a licensed water conditioning company to come out, and they'll service that every year or two.
Yeah.
I would love if everybody got a water sample every year or two like the EPA suggests, but there's not many people that do that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
We try to focus that down on, if you're expecting child or you're just sick more often, or maybe you're bringing in the in-laws, if there's some change of lifestyle, it's a good time to sample. I do suggest everybody samples with the extensive stuff at least once, every 10 years. Because there's some crazy stuff out there. On the septic side, not as easy, right? It really does require maintenance, and this is where people hear, pump out the tank and you'll be good. I think it takes a little bit more than that. It takes a professional eye. A lot of the pumpers in our industry are kind of like owner-operators, and they're not always as professional and looking ahead to, shield you from future expenses, for example. Yeah. And I don't think I told you this, but we did start doing an operations and maintenance program for homeowners to kind of schedule pumping as needed. And we're protecting them and making sure that the pump truck driver doesn't tell them it needs pumped every year when it really needs pumped every 3 years.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is when a septic system fails, you're usually waking up one morning, or because you had Friday, people over on a Friday night and it's failing. And then it's an emergency situation. They get a company out there to give you a quote to replace it.
And you feel kind of hogtied too. You gotta, I gotta go with this because I gotta get it done.
And aren't you hogtied? I mean, the installer knows exactly, your time constraints. They know that you're not going to be getting 3 quotes. And there's some, I don't want to say advantage taking, but when these guys have to come out in a matter of a week or two, they're going to make you pay for it. And what we can do, as we do with our inspections, is it's so detailed we can kind of see when a system's going to be failing within the next year or 6 months or something like that. And it allows a homeowner to budget both financially but mentally too, because it's just a bad day when you have to get your yard dug up.
Right.
And we want to take care of them and make sure that they're not overspending with contractors, both on the maintenance side and the repair side.
That's very cool. I will look forward to getting more information from you on that program. I love that addition. Okay, cool. All right, so average lifespan, and how long does a well pump last? How long is a well supposed to last? How long does a septic system last? And then, are there kind of costs in replacing them?
Yeah. So a well itself, right, this bored structure in the earth, hopefully that's going to last a lifetime. The well pump that's inside that well, that's probably only going to last 15 or 20 years. It's going to burn up. And again, it's the headache. There's no signs it's going to fail. It just stops working one day. An emergency situation. Yeah. There are
unless you're my good client. I love this guy. I have this client Rick who I love him. He's so awesome. But he just bought a property and they had the well pump wasn't old, and he's just like, but I'm buying it and it's going to be my house and I'm just going to replace the well pump, and then I'm going to do that every 5 to 10 years just because I never want to have the issue.
The headache.
Yeah.
I mean, I would not say that that's efficient, but again, that day is a bad day,
It can be a very bad day.
Not to plug other companies, but there are a couple of companies that we work with that provide well warranties. I believe you know who they are. That can kind of soften that load. And, maybe that's something we get in one day too, because just like you described this person, it's something that some professionals just don't want to deal with.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Let me answer the other part of the question.
Go ahead.
So the septic system, keep in mind that this absorption area, right, so the water in your septic systems goes in the ground on your property, and that soil is a filter.
Yeah.
It's designed to clog, it's designed to fail, and it's going to be about every 30 years where you do have to replace your septic system. So a well could go on for 100 years. A septic system, if it's constructed correctly, will fail.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the guy, remember that situation that I told you about with the distribution box and the two different fields? They were saying this field's untouched. Switch it over now, and you've got another 20 to 30 years easily. And then when that fails, you might be able to switch back. So it can, over time,
Oh, absolutely.
recover.
I don't want to bore you guys, but when a septic system fails, when that soil fails with getting clogged with what we call biomat, theoretically, if you can let that rest for a period of 15 years without, continuing to put water in there, that biomat will kind of eat itself up and the soil will unclog itself.
Wow.
And, just like the maintenance I was telling you, like if I know this system and I know this, I'm going to teeter that back and forth every 5 years, never let the one fail. And the theory could be that system never fails. And again, that's why I feel a lot of homeowners are kind of left in the dark, because a septic pumper is not going to do that.
Right.
It's just kind of outside of their area of expertise, and they don't care, And if you're an installer, you're certainly not going to do that.
It's not to their advantage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right, so how about size and capacity? How can I find out what the size and capacity of the systems are if I'm considering maybe buying that property?
Public record is the best way to do about it. Baltimore County is great. You can send them an email. You'll probably have records in an hour.
And isn't that awesome? Because I think in some other counties, it's like a public information request thing that
they're
it's going to take you weeks to get the information.
There's still counties that make us fax in their request. Carroll County, for the longest time, refused to honor the public information request, and they were just not giving us records. They were shorthanded after COVID, and I guess they weren't getting the proper funding from their politicians, and they just told us we're not going to do it. It doesn't make life easy for us when we have to go out there blind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the best way. And just a quick little note with that, you see a lot of people, right, turn their den into a bedroom.
Yeah.
And hey, it's a bedroom now, but is it a bedroom? So
if you're on well and septic, that's an issue.
Septic permit's going to tell me this is made for a 3-bedroom home. We're supposed to look at the listing and see if that's listed for 3 bedrooms or not. If it's listed for 4, I'm supposed to make a note of that. It doesn't fail the system, but I'm supposed to make a note of that. And technically, that appraiser should be coming back out there and knocking that appraisal down to a 3-bedroom home, as I understand
because
it.
it's not, that system is not set up for a 4-bedroom home. So that's another consideration, absolutely. You can't just add onto your property or convert some other space into a bedroom and call it a bedroom and say, not if you're on well and septic. So that's a great point.
We do, every now and then, we do some commercial work, and one we had in the spring was somebody in Anne Arundel County that wanted to put a school on a property. And the health department said, hey, before we tell you how many kids you can have, we have to see how big your septic system is. And that dictated what the capacity of the school is going to be.
Wow. And then I guess they can't handle that like Baltimore County and just overcrowd the school.
Yeah,
so.
right.
Anyway. All right. So any additional costs or considerations involved if you need to, have a system put in, obtaining permits, things like that? What's that process like?
Everything's kind of handled as a one-stop shop. If you really want to do a septic system correctly, you would come to a company like us and say, hey, design this system for me via the perk test and so forth. And then that homeowner would take that design and shop it around to 5 companies.
And he mentioned the term, so I'm going to just take a second to define it, perk test, right? So not everybody will understand what perk test means. But, when you have a septic system, you have to determine whether that soil can absorb if
you're going to put a septic system in a lot with a bunch of clay, it's going to back up, and that $10,000 you invest is going to not last very long. And so they do a perk test, which can happen different ways, but basically you're digging a hole in the ground and you're testing to see how fast that soil can take water. COMAR, or Bible in Maryland, says that the bottom of the septic system has to have at least a 4-foot buffer between the water table and the bottom of the system, or between bedrock and the bottom of your septic system. So you're talking waterfront properties. In Pasadena, the water table's at 4 feet. So now you have to put a sand mound in, which is above ground, and now you have the 4-foot separation to satisfy COMAR, but that's where you have different systems, all a result of the perk test.
Right. Yeah, okay. All right, so if I'm selling, like I live on a property, it has well and septic, what should if I'm getting the house ready for sale, I'm decluttering, I'm taking my personal photos off, I'm doing all that other kind of stuff inside the house, but this is a big system. Are there things that I should do to get the system ready for sale?
Yeah, I'm going to say no as an inspector because I want to see that system under the normal working conditions.
Yeah,
And
sure.
sometimes you run into a situation where a seller will pump the tank out before an inspection.
Right,
and it basically drives out the system. And if we know about it, we can basically kind of back into the math and figure out how it looks. But if we don't know it, we could get confused and think the system looks a lot better than it normally does.
Ooh. Yeah.
So we like normal operating conditions. On a well, I will tell you if it's a vacant property, it's not a bad idea to start running some water in there and just get that water flowing through. Otherwise, you can get an elevated level of bacteria. And it's just a headache where you get in the sample and then you have to go through the chlorination process. So if you're a seller or listing agent, running the water for a vacant home can be advantageous.
Especially if it's vacant. Yes, absolutely, because it's been sitting for a while. Yeah.
If it's an occupied home, it shouldn't need that.
Yeah. Good. All right, so that was 10. You know how we like to turn things up to 11. So we got another question for you. Any just kind of common pitfalls or mistakes you see buyers and sellers make when dealing with these systems?
Sellers, no. Other than lying to us, giving us false information, or
Yeah.
maybe not lying, but sometimes people think information is true and it's not true. That can be a little bit deceiving. But no, there's really nothing that I see the buyers do in error. For the sellers doing error. On the buyer side, as I was mentioning earlier, you might pick an inferior inspection.
Yeah.
Somebody that is just not as diligent as you want it, and you can kind of get burned on the back end. And really, just in this last year, right, with people not getting inspections, I don't want to say that that's a mistake because, it's part of the deal. It's part of the math, and, you have to figure it out. But it's an elevated level of risk. And I guess your job as an agent is to make sure that they understand what the elevated level of risk is, and that's really hard to define.
What kind of risk are you assuming?
Yeah.
Because it could be a very significant risk. Yeah.
Well, even if you're buying it as is, you can still inspect it and know what you're getting into.
Maybe.
It
depends.
Yeah, really
it depends on what you wrote up in the contract. If you wrote up in the contract, we are waiving inspections, you're not having
I'm always surprised why would anybody do that. I mean, I understand buying it.
I want to be so competitive. I don't want them to
you're buying
think,
it as is. I mean, you're not going to pay. The seller only cares about what they get to repair. Right?
That's true, but even if you're buying it as is, say you find something that's just horrible, and you have your inspection and you decide you're going to walk away.
Even if you buy it as is,
yeah,
you cannot sell a property with a latent defect that you know about.
If they know about it, and that's the truth.
But the hard part is proving that they knew about it. Well, if there's records of previous tests or something like that.
Right. It's underground. They may not necessarily know. It's not a visible thing.
Yeah.
So I will say this, when MD came out to regulation, I really hope that they would make our inspections, all Maryland septic inspections, public record.
I think it's a great idea.
But they're not. And this new real estate contract we have as of October really kind of prohibits the buyer from showing the seller this information. Before, hey, we're buying as is, but we're getting inspections. Oh, by the way, you're failing at all this stuff. Give us $50,000 or we're walking away.
Right.
That kind of ended October 1st as I see it with that information being relayed.
Depending on how it's written up. Yeah, but so it can be tricky, right? I mean, and if they waive them all together, then they have no protections, and it
but it's an attractive offer, and
it's very
if
attractive.
If you've been looking at
homes
for 6 months and getting turned away.
So if you've got an extra, let's just make it the worst case scenario. Let's say you've got a failing well, and it's.
And a 30-year septic.
And a 30-year septic that's also going to fail. And you live on a navigable river. And it just let's pile it on, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so you have to install a bat system. That's not a bat cave thing. That's best available technology, right? So those systems can be 50, 60,
so these
80,
are the horror stories, and
right.
I will say some numbers, but my job is not to scare people.
Right.
But yeah, so a new well, minimum of $10,000 nowadays. I used to say 7 after COVID. I'm saying 10. It can be more.
Yeah.
With the well, you have the risk of maybe not finding enough water. That's possible. With the septic system, 10,000 is probably on the low end. That's crossing the fingers, having a fast passing park test. The situation you described, I'm thinking drip irrigation system. That's a $40,000 system plus $15,000 for the tank, which is that BAT tank.
Right.
Hopefully the state grant pays for that, but maybe not. And so this is like a 1 out of 100, situation,
Right.
but they happen.
Yeah.
And when you talk to the person that's happening to, it's not a good experience.
This is where the horror stories come from. However, they are vastly the exception rather than the rule. right? But I think that's what people...
And an inspector, if you're going that far, can kind of know where the soils are good and bad. Like, for example, Kingsville has some poor soils. We know this as inspectors. Joppatown has some poor soils. Owens Mills has some bad wells. The Falls Road Corridor has some bad wells. So I think the experience kind of helps us have those conversations with people to help them gauge the risk.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, beautiful. Dude, great information. Anything, just in summary, anything else that you want to mention that just general guiding advice?
I was looking at the Y website.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed is that they don't benefit from any remediation. They're only a testing site, which is important to note. So they're going to give you good information.
Yeah.
And
right.
I think the real estate industry, you're saying a lot of people refer us for the work. That's what they like about us, is
right.
that we are kind of an environmental professional company, but we're not making money off the repairs.
Right.
And
to me, that's huge.
That is huge.
It's
I thought
huge.
when I was looking at the website, I thought that was big.
Well, I'll be honest, our company's gotten hurt the last 2 years, with this
sure.
market. And, if we were doing installs, you have to,
right.
the mind is going to go towards making money and surviving, just naturally. You know? So I think it's really important for any testing company to have that neutrality. Home inspectors have it by law now, I believe.
Right. Well, most home inspectors, not chimney inspectors.
Right, yes.
That's
That's
challenge.
different than home.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the same thing
Right.
with, you have a lot of water samplers that are water conditioning companies.
Right.
That's kind of who our competition is. Sometimes it's home inspectors, but they might not have the vast knowledge that, the guys that do the installations have.
Yeah, right. Good. All right, well, guys, fellas, great information. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into the unreal
And the
spotlight. So we'll be back in just a sec.
Trap.
So it's time for the unreal.
Yeah, time for the unreal. And
It
you got
is-
something for us.
It's the beginning of July. You know what goes out in the beginning of July? Property tax
Property
bills. It's never a
taxes,
fun
yeah.
time for people to receive them in the mail. And it often isn't a fun time for loan officers because they get tons of calls
and realtors.
and realtors about,
Yep.
wait a minute, I thought my property taxes were included in when I bought the house, included in my monthly payment. Well, for the most cases, I'd say for the vast majority of people, it is included in your monthly payment.
Yeah.
The counties are still going to send you a bill, right, Brad?
Yep,
They have to
absolutely.
do it every year.
Right.
So there's a couple things you can do. You can call your loan officer. Now, every loan officer who's listening to the show probably hates me because their phones will be ringing off the hook. I get inundated with it every year, and I don't mind. I take the time to get back to people.
It's an opportunity to talk to somebody.
But if you get a property tax bill, there's a couple ways. If you set up an online account,
Yeah.
you can go log into that account, and the second it's paid, you'll see it come out of your escrow account.
Right.
Or if you get paper statements, just wait till the August, or in the case of Harford County where they're not due till September, a little later in the year,
Right.
to see that property tax.
make sure that it was paid.
Make sure that it was paid. If it's the first year that you've bought the home, it is why it is going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
You can count on your escrow department or your
I get
lender
that
to
call
pay that.
all the time from the new home buyer who says, "Hey, I thought this was part of
Because
it.
they don't want to see a
Yeah.
They see a $4,000 or
Right.
$5,000 or $6,000 bill and they get
I
scared.
gotta pay this. Oh my gosh!"
That
Yeah.
frightens them.
Right.
No, but it is smart to verify that it is paid out of your escrow system.
Yeah.
I usually
Right.
go a step further, and I had somebody email me, wait a minute second, Michael, and I looked at it, I said, hey, guess what? It is being paid. We escrowed for $705. It looks like the bill's going to be $719. In a few months, when your anniversary of your purchase, your house comes up, they're going to do an escrow analysis, and you can see your monthly payment go up a little bit. Just be prepared. It might
Right.
go up $15 or $20 or $30, something
Right.
like that.
So now the unreal part of this.
Now, there is an
Michael,
unreal part
'cause
about
this
this.
is great information.
This
but
is, all right, in Baltimore County, it's part of your property tax bill. You get charged a few additional things.
Right.
Bay restoration fee of $60, water distribution. But the big one is what's called sewer service. Sewer service, and it's based on the amount of water that was used at that property.
Yeah.
And I've seen it vary greatly when I'm doing purchases for people, meaning the total property tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
Identical townhomes right next to each other can have $1,000 to $1,500 difference.
Yeah.
And I always wondered what was going on in that person's house. They didn't notice the water. Well, guess what? It came up and bit me in the what. Personally, this year,
Yeah.
I got my property tax bill and it's $1,900 higher than it was a year ago.
Ouch.
A little bit of that is the increase in the assessed value, but most of it is the sewer service bill. And I started thinking about it, and I remember last summer of 22,
Yeah.
I got a big water bill of like $440.
Yeah.
It's every quarter.
way
It's
out
usually
of-
$20
yeah,
to
way out of sync with
$50.
what- yeah,
it
right.
seems like per quarter. So I contacted my property manager. He went out there and checked it out. It seemed like there were a few leaky toilets that he fixed. I'm hoping that was it. the next quarter after that, it went back to normal.
Right.
But guess what happened? Because of that big month of water usage, that $440 water bill, my sewer service went from $237 to over $1,900.
Thanks, Baltimore County.
It's going to hammer me when it comes to my escrow.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be short, and then they're going to assume that that's the bill moving forward.
Right. So they're going to make an adjustment.
It could be upwards of $300 increase in my monthly payment.
Yeah.
Learn from, well, it wasn't my error because I have tenants who are there who aren't, interesting, they're not motivated. But like me, if I hear something, I'm sitting in my house with a dad, you hear water running, right? Yeah. You're running around the house to find out where it's coming from.
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's usually a toilet. It's a flapper valve that went bad.
Something like that.
Or the chain's broken or something, or the chain got underneath the flapper valve and the water's just running. It's an easy fix.
Right.
Or in the case of recently, I had a broke tank, had a crack in a tank. So it would fill up, and then it was a slow leak out of it.
Yeah,
There's all these things that can be fixed.
Yeah.
But as a tenant, you probably do not have the incentive to fix those things.
Or even awareness, maybe. Because you're not the homeowner, so you're not thinking you're going to pay for it.
Yeah, but be on the outlook for running water anytime. It's not a good thing because where's it going, right? And if you're living there, even if you're renting, what if you have mold that, you don't catch the running water in the basement and then you have a mold problem? Guess what? You have to move out.
Yeah. Or if you have a septic system, you're going to flood that guy.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Anyway, for the Baltimore County residents out there, pay attention to your property tax bill. Pay attention to your water bills.
Yeah.
Your water, because it's a year delay.
If you see a big bump in that water bill.
So I looked it up. The sewer service is from the sewer service charges from the previous year. So that was a bill. I paid that bill in August, but I think it was probably June or July's water bill. So it was from July of 21 to 22 that has hit me for this year's property taxes.
Yeah.
So that's quite a bit unreal. And my property taxes went from $3,900 to $5,700.
Now, this should be able to be resolved, right? There are steps.
Worst case, it's a 1-year thing that I'm going to have to deal with.
Right.
But I'm hoping I'm going to fight it. I'm going to argue it with the county.
It's an anomaly, right. And if you can show that it's been an anomaly, that yes, this is a 1-month bill that was out of whack, and come on.
There are, well, this is maybe a topic for another show or another Unreal segment. I understand there are condominiums that are suing Baltimore County for their sewer service charge. They feel that they were overcharged because it's like, think of the...
I'm seeing an opportunity here. There should be a business that protests.
Well, it's a very weird way to charge people. Wouldn't it be better to just bill them directly and bill them in real time instead of having it a year delayed?
Yeah.
It's kind of a...
Yeah.
But I guess Baltimore County, since we get our water for Baltimore City, that's how they figured the best way to handle it.
Right. So pretty unreal. Got to be
That
careful.
was unreal.
Yeah. So
Be
watch
careful,
those
folks.
water bills. Watch your tax bills. Pay attention. Yeah. Great. All right. Rolling into the spotlight. This week, we're spotlighting Golden West in Hamden.
So
in Hamden, hon.
Hamden.
I was thinking about doing the whole thing
with
a Baltimore accent.
You got to, but I got to say something before you start. When I first looked down at it, I said, Golden West, is that a Chinese place? But it would be Golden East.
Golden East. I had the same conversation. So I went with my wife and my friend Jen, my dear friend Jen, who I've known longer than I've known you,
Okay.
Michael.
Very good.
Tells you how far back that is. We went just this past weekend. And great experience.
You went to Hamden, huh?
I went down Hamden. Yeah.
I've been to Golden West many times for brunch. It's great.
It's awesome. They really are. They're really good. So they've been there since 1997. Hamden staple, 1105 West 36th Street, Baltimore, 21211. So Downey Avenue.
Downey Avenue.
Yeah, this is going to get a little old, I think, for people. But anyway, but they like to say they're a little Southwest and a little Wild West. But
what's amazing about their Brussels sprouts?
Oh, dude,
are they crispy? Ooh, I love crispy. I'm not a Brussels sprout fan, but if you crisp them, put a little bacon in it.
Yeah,
they are good there.
They're really, really
Makes you want to eat
good.
vegetables.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
That's it. And add a little bacon, maybe. Oh, yes.
Well,
Brings the grease.
Anything's better with bacon. Yeah,
absolutely.
Pumpkin curry soup. That's
love
just
my fish
out of the
tacos.
way. Fish tacos. Yeah, huevos rancheros. So my buddy Jen this past weekend ordered the Elvis pancakes. Oh my god.
Peanut butter banana. Yeah, he liked peanut butter
banana, bacon, and pancakes. Oh my god.
That's delicious.
I mean, it's amazing. And then they've got a ton of really good vegan and gluten-free options if you need that. So they're great. They actually won the Baltimore Magazine Best Vegetarian Dishes Award in 2022. So just a great great spot. If you're down in that area, that's a great spot to stop in. They're open every day. Sunday through Thursday, they're open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. They're on Instagram at Golden West Cafe. On the web, www.goldenwestcafe, or you can call them 410-889-8891. I do recommend reservations. They are hopping. They do quite a bit of business, but if you haven't been, give them a try. If you have been, go back. Great experience that I had this weekend. Our server was phenomenal. Jen fell in love with one of their managers there too. He's pretty attractive, well-proportioned gentleman, but she was rather enamored with him. But anyway, great spot. Check them out, and you won't be sorry. Anyway, so guys, episode 24 in the books. Thank you so much. Next episode, Michael.
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk about downsizing.
Ooh.
When less can be more.
It's something that I think is being delayed right about now because of the interest rates that some have on their mortgages.
Yeah.
Eventually.
And I think we want to talk about that because there's some ways that people can think about downsizing where it may not be as much of an issue. For those people who might want to downsize, they may have more options available to them than they realize, and the interest rates may be less of an impact for them.
Well, yeah, if you're downsizing, you would think you have a good bit of equity in your home, and you might be able to pay cash for the next home or have a very small mortgage payment or small loan with a small mortgage payment.
Absolutely. So anyway, so that's next week. Folks, if you want to listen to us, we're on all the major podcast platforms. You can listen to us on Spotify, on Podbean, on any of them that you choose. You can also listen to us on our website, www.berealpod.com. You can also search for us. We're on YouTube. You just search for @BeRealMDPod. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and like and comment. And if you know, and share. And if you know of anybody, right, who would benefit from the information that we have shared today or in any of our other episodes, feel free to share that out to them. So, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Somebody needs to reach you to talk about all matters mortgage. How do they get in touch?
My phone is always the best way to reach me. You can always call me at 443-310-0012. Or if you prefer, a text. Text works. You say you heard the podcast, you had a question, and give me your name, and I'll give you a call right back. If you prefer, you're sitting at your computer and you prefer to email me, you can do that at michael.becker@spmc.com.
Great. And Tim, if somebody wants to reach your company, Homeland Environmental, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The phone's the best, 443-995-5385. If you want to do some investigation, our website has a lot of great information, and that's homelandhealthyhomes.com.
It is a great website. I was looking at it while you guys were discussing.
Tons of information on that site.
Yeah.
And if you need to reach me, 410-375-7550, whether that's text or call. And then via email, it's brad@homesbyvesta.com. Folks, thanks for listening today. Tune in next week, and we'll give you some more great information on downsizing when less can be more. That's coming up in the next episode of Be Real,
the Maryland Real Estate Podcast.
Take care, folks.
Try me.